Science isn't science until we've communicated it to somebody else, and preferably somebody in the general public. So if we can excite the youth or the general public about the science we're doing, it adds value to the community. It becomes common knowledge. It becomes a pride of the nation, whatever it is, and that adds to value. That actually adds to the economy of the country, or the world for that matter. And so everything we do, we must think in terms of how do we make a project cool? How do we make it so interesting and cool that kids want to go into science? How do we do that? Today we're going to talk about what is Practicool, making something that's practical, our science project, and making it so interesting and cool that it adds to the economy. The GERA Foundation presents this series called Navigating Research. Here we have a simple graph that gives us a reasonable representation of what we're trying to talk about here. So in effect, anything that doesn't help us to reach our goals, anything that's impractical, so its functionality is going towards zero, equals a waste of money. Waste of money, very bad. Very bad. You don't want to build white elephants. You just don't. You don't want to build white elephants. You want to build things that are going to reach your goals. They have to be functional, first and foremost. Got to be functional, okay? And then, of course, we also think that if we build something that looks more stylish, cooler, makes the project more exciting, it will lead to more people interested and therefore a greater return on the taxpayer's investment. So those are the two things we're looking for. And if we do it right, if we find the right solution, and we're missing the third axis here, which is cost, if we can do it for a good cost, we can actually attain Practicool. Now, Practicool isn't this corner here, actually. It's this corner, but it has to be, we do it at a much more reduced cost. So we really want to be cost conscious all the time. So Practicool is, it's practical, it's cool, and we're doing it for a good price. The auto industry is a really decent industry to use to sort of give you an idea of functionality versus style versus cost, because cost really is a big factor in this story. This is a 1979 Ford Fairmont. I owned one of these babies while I was in grad school and put 200,000 Ks on it. It got me from A to B. I played lots of rugby driving this car. I enjoyed it, got me around. That's all that mattered. It was functional. I could fit 3 or 4 of my buddies in this car. We could drive anywhere and play rugby, and it was just perfect for what I needed at the time. And it worked. It was inexpensive, the whole story. So not very expensive, not very stylish, clearly, and most importantly, it was functional. Now this, on the other hand, is my 2007 Mazda MX-5 that I used to drive in South Africa when I worked for the government there. Now, clearly, it's a lot more stylish than the Fairmont. I really did upscale, I must tell you. And the cool factor in this thing, you drive around this thing and people, it's a nice looking car and people look at you. But for me, I didn't benefit from that because I myself am not very cool. But this car was very stylish, really cool, but it wasn't very functional. I mean, literally, I could only fit a second person in the car, and nothing, almost nothing fit in the trunk or the boot of the car. So this was my baby. Loved it. Loved driving it, but not very functional, though very stylish. This is what we really want to drive. This is a flying car, a futuristic vehicle. Obviously does not exist yet, but boy, oh boy, does it look cool. It just looks cool. It just does. And it's going to be a vehicle where you could take passengers, have stuff in that, so it's going to be practical and cool. You don't have to worry about traffic jams, etc. But if you were in that thing, you're going to feel pretty damn cool. That is pretty cool. And so that is where the auto industry will probably go to ultimately. At least that's what we've been told for 100 years, by the way. But that would be cool. Another great example of this idea of functionality versus style versus cost is the space programs. Clearly, it's much more believable, and believable is the wrong word. I mean, I'm talking about in terms of what is exciting in that. If we remember the old Apollo missions, it was always cool to watch the launches of that. And likewise, when the space shuttles were launching and landing, it was great. And watching them, in fact, I met one of the astronauts who was doing the spacewalks from the space shuttle to fix the Hubble telescope, which is, pretty cool. Jeffrey Hoffman, great guy, just an exceptional person. Anyways, but I was fortunate enough to meet the man. On the right-hand side, of course, that was run by NASA, by the way. Very expensive, very expensive. And now, in today's age, we have private companies like SpaceX, and they're driving the cost down of this whole process of getting into space. So not only do they have the functionality of the space shuttle, they also have it's much cheaper to operate, basically, full stop. And I think they look cool. And I love watching the launches and so on as well. So here's a great example. This is the Starship from SpaceX, and it's got a 1950s sci-fi look to it, which is kind of a cool throwback, retro look. Anyways, that's the story. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is when they were testing for these rockets, the SpaceX rockets, I think they actually intentionally blew up one of their rockets just to gain more notoriety, to make it interesting for the viewers, because don't explosions look cool? So here's the one I'm talking about. This is SN10. They landed. It seems to land fine. You can see a fire on the bottom of it. So maybe there was damage. Maybe there was damage. Okay? The smoke. It's cool to watch these things. It just is. I don't know what people do when to me, this is entertaining. Perhaps others don't see it that way. But here it is a few minutes later. And look, it's tilting a little bit. Maybe there was something wrong. I think he blew it up intentionally. I think he blew it up intentionally because it's spectacular and it attracts audiences, and he was trying to be cool. The project I'm considering, that I'm trying to reach, to become practical, is putting a telescope on the saddle at 4,500 meters or above on Kilimanjaro, Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Now, you can see in this graph the four things that are. So things that are impractical are carrying it up the mountain, because some of the parts are 14 tons. That's impractical. And it's really uncool to ask people to do that.
Godspeed, boy.
We can tunnel using Elon Musk, the Boring Company. But it's impractical because it's expensive, one, and two, this is a volcano. It was one of my stupid ideas, really stupid idea. This is a volcano. You don't want to drill into a volcano. So tunneling is impractical because of cost and the fact that it's a volcano, but it's a really cool possibility. Could you imagine? That would be a cool project. So that's the two that are impractical, uncool and cool. Now, we have one, building a road is very practical, very practical. So it's very functional too, but it's very uncool because it's ugly. It's an eyesore, and worse, this is a protected mountain. It has a rainforest around it where we can't cut down trees. So if I have to expand the road, which is what we would have to do to move a telescope up there, that would become impractical. So it's practical, but it would become very uncool. It will not be sold. They will not buy into the idea. It won't work. So we then have to go to something else. We have to go over the rainforest, and there's two ways for that. One was cable car, which everybody loved in Tanzania, everybody. And the project was eventually handed over to another group. And unfortunately, the cable car is going to another part of the mountain, which doesn't help us for the telescope. So we need to come up with a new way, and that is the airship industry. And this is really cool. So this thing but there are airships being built now that can lift up to 60 or 100 tons, and at up to 4,500 meters, they can get about half that. So, we can get 30 tons up to 4,500 meters, which means we can lift this telescope in one piece to 4,500 meters on Kilimanjaro. And that would be really cool, one, because it looks cool, but also because the documentary would be an incredibly good seller worldwide. Making a documentary of that would increase global interest in Tanzania, leading to more tourism, greater return on investment. Simple as that. This is really cool. This is Practicool. This is Practicool. The industry itself is practical by definition because it's cool, it's practical, and it's inexpensive relative to a lot of the other things that people try to do, especially in the far north of Canada or in exotic places like telescopes on Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. Start. These are 4 excellent examples from the last 100 years or so of people who I believe best represent who think Practicool, have done great things, each in their own right, and I wonder if anybody in the airship industry will one day join this august group. This company, flyingwhales.com, is probably one of the reasons why I'm talking about using airships to build the telescope on Kilimanjaro. The cable car system was a great idea, wonderful idea, and this thing could even build that, by the way. But unfortunately, the cars are going somewhere else on the mountain and therefore doesn't help us build telescopes. This is a really, really cool idea. This is economical, it's cool, it's functional, it has every aspect of Practicool in it. This smells Practicool, it is Practicool, and this is the way we want to build our telescope on Kilimanjaro. No other way. This is the real answer. And if we were to do it, the documentary we can make would be absolutely amazing. Anybody in the world would want to watch. You know, you see the Discovery Channel and all the movies, all the shows they make on heavy lift, movement, and stuff like that. This would be a great example of that. Not only would it help us do the increased tourism into Tanzania, it would help the company get exposure. So whichever company, whoever ends up helping us to put this telescope on Kilimanjaro will benefit, you know, as will the country of Tanzania, as will the astronomy community. And that truly is the nature of Practicool. And that's what we're trying to do here, and that's what we hope to do. So Practicool is using an airship to lift a telescope onto the mountain. The GERA Foundation will produce more videos like this. Please like, share, or subscribe if you enjoyed this video.